I think one of the most memorable boat trips I ever took was back in the mid '70s when I took my wood drift boat made by Boat Specialties down in Salem. And I took a friend of mine by the name of Walt McGovern, who was responsible for getting the steelhead made a game fish in the Columbia River back in the '70s. And Walt was the president of the Northwest Steelheaders at that time, and he and I trailered my wood drift boat 1,000 miles up to the Maurice River, tributary of the Skeena. One stretch of river, I saw a black bear that was had his head underneath the water hunting fish, and I told Walt, "Don't say a word, Walt, and don't move, because I'm going to get as close to the black bear as I can get with the drift boat." Because the water was about 5 feet deep and moving quickly, I knew the bear wouldn't be able to do anything to us, and so I got to within probably 10 feet of the bear, and all of a sudden he lifted his head, had a fish, a dead fish hanging across his mouth. The water was streaming down his eyes, and you could just see his eyes dilate, go from little peas up to big, big, just dilation. Scared the hell out of him. He turned around, leapt out of the water, went up about a 10-foot bank, and disappeared into the woods. I told Walt that I apologized because I was afraid that, I almost had given the bear a heart attack. It was a dumb thing to do, but we were in no danger, and I didn't know the bear would take it so frightfully. And so that was one of my favorite experiences. Another time, I had my son Nick, who is the editor of Salmon, Trout, Steelheader now. Nick was about 14 at the time, and I had my friend from Italy, Silvio Machadri, who was about my age. We were up on the Lake Creek, a tributary of the Susitna River outside of Anchorage. And the idea was that you'd anchor the boat and then you'd fly cast out to the Chinook salmon. Anyway, Silvio hooked this Chinook salmon, turned out in the end to be 47 pounds in weight. I was sitting in a chair on the shore watching them, and for a few minutes nothing too much happened other than a bunch of yelling and screaming. Then the fish decided that he was going to go downstream in the current on the Etna. And the Etna is about 1,000 feet wide and moving about 5 miles an hour. And in no time they were gone. I couldn't see them. They'd gone around an island. And about 15 or 20 minutes went by, and I thought, my God, this is getting a little worrisome. Just about that time, I saw Nick and Silvio coming back up the stream towards me, and they were waving their hands all excitedly. As soon as they got to shore, they told me that Silvio's fish had continued fighting as they drifted down the river, and when it came time to attempt to net the fish, Silvio told Nick, "Now I don't want you to do the same thing that your dad did to me last night on a big fish. I don't want you to bump him off the hook." So this made Nick extremely nervous, and plus the fact that you couldn't see more than 6 inches into the river. So Nick it wasn't going to be an easy net job when you can't see the fish. All of a sudden the fish started to splash around, and it actually leapt into the low-sided John boat. Silvio, who was all of probably 5'6", with a red beard, fell on him and then clubbed it to death and said, "This fish is going back to Milan with me, Frank." And we got back up to the lodge. This all happened right by the lodge. And people came out and were marveling at it. It turned out to be 47 pounds. That was a second great event. I was invited by a fellow named Ken Belford to come to British Columbia. He was a hunting guide up in the Spatsizi Wilderness area. He said, in his letter, he said, "Frank, I think I have steelhead in this stream that goes through my hunting territory." We got out there, and I was in the canoe, and he was in the back of the canoe, and as soon as we got to the outlet, in the clear water and the sandy bottom, I started spotting like groups of steelhead in 2s and 4s and 6s and 1s, and there must have been about 50 to 100 steelhead in the first 100 yards of this small stream coming out of the lake, and I thought I was at Steelhead Valhalla, and which I really was. And I got an opportunity to fish that stream for many years with mainly flies, because they were summer steelhead essentially in October, and it was they were very receptive, and they're nice sized fish too. We caught them up to like probably the mid 20 pounds. So those were three more outstanding experiences.